So hello and good morning and welcome everyone from wherever you are joining. It could be good morning, good evening, and good afternoon to you. And welcome to the launch of the Drawdown Report on Food, Agriculture, and Land Use in Southeast Asia. Thank you so much for taking the time and joining us today. I'm Swati Agarwal. I'm the Climate Director at the Asia Philanthropy Circle. For those who don't know about APC, it is a Singapore-based organization that brings a community of philanthropists working together to drive collective action for Asia's most pressing challenges. And it is a true privilege for me to share about one of those collective efforts at this forum with you all as we present the findings from a report on FALU, the food, agriculture, and land use sector. And it is an effort that is grounded in extensive data collection, rigorous analysis, and deep engagement across the region. So just to give you a sense of, how this work came about and how did it get culminated. So this work was culminated from a conversation and the needs emerging from APC's philanthropic members who came together in our climate collective to discuss some of the pressing issues for the region and unpack some key questions, that we are all grappling with. And I think few of those were like, in the light of the limited resources and capacities that we have, how do we prioritize our actions? Or where can we have the most impact from our philanthropic engagements in the region, and so on. And these are not new questions. These are not questions of today, but I think these are some things that we really needed to build our capacity moving forward. And therefore, about a year and a half ago, about 5 APC members, they came together to support how do we bridge some of these gaps and help create a public resource on one of these most urgent and complex challenges facing Asia, the emissions generated from our food and land use systems. Now, why FALU? And I think it goes without saying, because these systems, they sit at the heart of the region's economic growth, but also the climate, potential and the climate impact that it drives, with profound impact on the livelihoods, the ecosystems, and also it's so critical for the long-term resilience of the community. So APC, so when all of this thinking was coming together, APC commissioned this report with support from its members, and I would like to recognize them on this call today. So with support from Quantage Advancement Initiative, RS Group, Annette Ackman, Vatanan Petersik, and one another funder of APC. They all came together to support this, and we partnered with Project Drawdown, who brought their rigorous science-based expertise and a skill team to help develop this resource. So we also, as a result of this, while deep research were going on, we brought together a team of reviewers and advisors from the region to help validate the findings and address regional realities as the work was shaping up over the last couple of months. Now, where we stand today, I think this provides a vital evidence base, but still acting as a starting point for a lot of action that needs to happen in the region moving forward. But a real resource to enable funders and partners prioritize and to build upon to drive more change more effectively. Now, the report covers deep analysis across 5 countries, which are critical from the lens of FALU in Southeast Asia. But the research team, they actually have looked at and assessed all the 11 countries in the region, which gives us a massive and a broader comparative view to work forward from. It also, one of the most interesting aspects, I would say, of the report is also that it highlights strategic hotspots through a unique methodology. And I know that John in his presentation is going to cover a lot more of that. But I think it's totally path-breaking where an 80-20 rule has been applied to help concentrate the efforts in the region. I mean, because the region is so vast, to help us concentrate our efforts in the most effective geographies, which will deliver majority of the climate benefits. So I think, some of these innovations that has actually gone into, the way this work came about, I think it really calls us to also think boldly about now collaboration, the investments and the strategic action that will go into the region moving forward. So I would say with that, today our goal is not only to absorb these insights, which we'll come to in the presentation. But also it's an invitation for you all and for us all to actually work together in helping identify practical, high leverage solutions which can deliver deeper impact. Now, just to take one of the examples, and this is one of the immediate examples and the practical outcomes as this work was taking shape and the research was ongoing, was how this work has been culminated, and the findings of this work has been culminated into the Drawdown Explorer, which was recently launched by John and team and Project Drawdown in September. So just to give you a brief, that the Drawdown Explorer is an open access online platform that provides detailed information on more than 100 climate solutions aimed at effectively reducing greenhouse gas emissions worldwide. And the solutions from Southeast Asia were actually informed by this work. So many thanks to everybody who were involved in putting that rigor and analysis and all of their labor and sweat into this. So similarly, I mean, this is just one of the examples. I think moving forward, we really hope that we can all make use of these insights in your work to help drive action in the run-up to some of the key climate and food systems events that we're also seeing coming up in the region, which are going to provide some excellent forum for us to open these conversations up with the wider community as well. And I'll let John share more about it. So with that, I'm so delighted to invite John to the floor. So Dr. Jonathan Foley is the Executive Director of Project Drawdown, an independent nonprofit organization driving bold science-based climate action. John is a world-renowned environmental scientist and sustainability expert with research spanning climate, ecosystems, and global food systems. At Project Drawdown, he leads efforts to identify and scale solutions that reduce greenhouse gas emissions while improving livelihoods and biodiversity. So with John, we will dive into the report for the next 40 minutes. So please feel free to use the chat function to ask questions, share your reflections as we go. And we will take all the questions for responses towards the end of the presentation. So with that, over to you, John.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Swati, for the very, very kind introduction. Okay, good. So, good morning and good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are in the world. And thank you all for being here today. We're so pleased to be showing a bit of the kind of highlights of the report that was just issued today in partnership with APC. And before I get started, I just want to give a really heartfelt thank you to the APC team, not only as colleagues and as funders, but as also wonderful reviewers and guides to kind of getting this work to be effective, helping us really hone this work, and to just being excellent partners along the way. So I want to, thank everyone at APC for making this possible in so many, many different dimensions. So it's really been a pleasure. But also to really highlight the people behind this work. I'm just the guy presenting it tonight, but a lot of the work really, really was done by a magnificent team who's here with me tonight. Jamie Gerber, Daria Sheikh, and Emily Cassidy, who did the analysis, the writing, and a lot of the work that you see here tonight. So when we get into some of the questions, I hope they can also join in the conversation and help provide a lot more context than I'm able to in the short kind of presentation. But today we're going to be talking about food and climate. And, this kind of thing about food is so amazing that we touch food several times a day in our lives. It's so every day. But yet it's also part of an incredible global system of the environment, our climate, and the future and fate of this planet. Now, that seems kind of strange to a lot of people. When you think about climate change, usually you think about issues of energy use. You think of smokestacks and tailpipes and things that burn fossil fuels. But it turns out the food system plays an instrumental part in the global environment. Mainly, this is because the food system is just so vast. It isn't because it's especially polluting, it's just an incredibly large part of the human enterprise and what we do to this planet. Just consider how farms show up all over the world in so many different ways, in so many different forms. And I bet if you think about it for a minute, you could probably guess where each of these satellite images were taken. But they're taken from, almost every continent, showing how food production is both the same and at the same time very different depending where you are in the world. So we have to reflect this kind of large collective footprint of the food system, but also its very local nature and how it can vary so much from place to place around the planet. But altogether, it's quite astonishing to think that food dominates this planet. In fact, close to 40% of all the land on Earth is used for growing food. About 29 of that 38% is in animal agricultural production. So, to first order, the largest ecosystem on this planet is agriculture. And to first order, most of that is for animal agriculture. And just the sheer footprint of this food production system means that it automatically is causing an unbelievable loss of forest around the world, and grasslands, and wetlands, and coastal ecosystems, and beyond. So, just as a driver of land use and habitat loss and biodiversity impacts, there's nothing rivaling the global food system in terms of environmental impact. Plus, at the global level, we also know the food system drives the largest amount of water use and also water pollution. In fact, about 70% of all the water withdrawals on the planet are used for one thing: irrigation. And irrigation is causing the decline of water resources in many, many parts of the world, including where I live in the United States or in places like Kazakhstan and the former Soviet Union, causing the collapse of the Aral Sea. The unsustainable use of water for irrigation is causing much of the damage to rivers, lakes, and water resources around the world. But then we come to climate change, and this is sometimes a surprise to people, that at the global scale, just the production of food alone is about 22% of the world's greenhouse gas emissions. And it rivals, even at the global scale, any other sector, whether it's electricity or industry or buildings and transportation combined, for example. It's a very large part of the climate puzzle. And at the global scale, we find that it includes many different things. It can include deforestation at globally 11% of the world's emissions, methane from livestock at about 5% of global emissions, industrial farming methods, including the release of nitrous oxide by overusing fertilizers in many fields around the world, and also, of course, rice production. Now, these are global average numbers. When we come to Southeast Asia, the mix is quite different and the numbers are different, again, reflecting that kind of regional and local nature of the food system. But at the global scale, these same numbers keep showing up again and again and again of the major drivers of impact. And of course, the food system goes beyond growing food and land use. It also includes things like processing, packaging, transporting food, and of course, food loss and food waste, what's being emitted from landfills, wastewater treatment, and so on. So again, this 22% is growing the food, but when we add everything else, it climbs to about 34% at the global level. And unlike other sectors of the economy, like electricity, where we have renewable energy and tremendous gains in technology, or in buildings and transportation, where we're beginning to bend the curve on emissions, in food, the emissions are basically rising almost everywhere. In fact, there are very few places on Earth where we can confidently say that food emissions are actually going down. So this is a large part of the climate puzzle, and it's one where we're going in the wrong direction very, very badly. On top of all that, as philanthropists, I think people need to be concerned also that food is probably the most underfunded aspect of climate change. If we could accept the fact that food contributes about 34% of the world's greenhouse gas emissions, roughly a third of the climate problem globally even, we have to also note that it only receives about 3% of climate financing, whether it's international aid, corporates, private investment, or philanthropy. All told, it's getting about 3% of the funding. That's a 10-to-1 gap between the size of the problem and the magnitude of the resources used to find solutions. So the food problem is big, it's going the wrong way, and it's underfunded. That alone is a real problem. The fourth part, though, is it's also a place where there's a lot of misinformation and misunderstanding, but also sometimes, unfortunately, deliberate disinformation, where sometimes special interests are playing kind of a heavy hand on spreading disinformation and greenwashing, distracting us from some of the real issues. So we believe that it's really time to clear the air and connect the dots between climate and food. And we're very, very pleased to work with APC and many of you to focus on Southeast Asia in particular and kind of double click into this part of the world and look at the role of the food system in the emissions of greenhouse gases. Now, why should we focus on Southeast Asia? Well, it's because it's so important to the global food system, and food plays a disproportionate role in Southeast Asia's greenhouse gas emissions. As I mentioned, globally, food production between land use and on-farm emissions contributes about 22% of the world's emissions. But in Southeast Asia, land use and food production total is actually the largest share of greenhouse gas emissions. In fact, it's over half of the emissions from the Southeast Asian region, unlike almost any other part of the world. So more than anywhere else, the role of the food system in Southeast Asia is dominant. So not only is the food system a major driver of emissions from Southeast Asia, and therefore a huge component of the commitments being made in Southeast Asia to addressing the global climate problem, we also have a region of the world that is also, like many, critically dependent on the food system for sustenance, for economic development, etc. And these systems are vulnerable to climate change. Will we see shorter seasons for irrigation, for water development? Will we have to have more reliance on groundwater irrigation as climate change becomes stronger and stronger across this region? These are all questions we need to answer in looking at the linkages between climate and food in Southeast Asia. So as we began this project, we thought about building a roadmap for solutions, not just a list of things that could be done, but also a roadmap about how they might be implemented, blending the science, of course, of what the problems are, and then identifying solutions, and then arriving at strategies for action. So we go from the science to solutions to strategies. Now, first and foremost, of course, we will always analyze the most effective climate solutions. This is a lot of what our organization, Project Drawdown, does. We independently, without financial interest, without political interest, from a distance, as a third party, we evaluate the performance of climate solutions around the world using all of the world's available data. We are essentially kind of a trusted resource of meta-analysis where we look at the global knowledge around climate solutions and present that for the world. But we also want to present strategies for scaling them. And I want to mention two of these strategies before we begin looking at the results. One is we really focus a lot on what we call emergency brake climate solutions. These are the solutions that act disproportionately quickly. They help bend the curve on future warming by focusing on the fastest acting climate solutions. So in the food system in particular, methane emissions, but also black carbon and deforestation, which can release large pulses of CO2 at a single day. When we burn a rainforest down, it releases 200 to 300 years of carbon in a single day. By focusing on these fast-acting parts of the climate system, we can bend the curve more quickly than through other solutions on future warming. And these so-called emergency brakes might be the key to bringing us back towards a Paris-like outcome in our global climate accords. So some of the emergency brakes we're going to be focusing on here tonight include stopping deforestation, a huge sudden release of carbon, but also cutting methane emissions, especially from rice, because methane is a truly fast-acting greenhouse gas that's a potent, super-polluting molecule, but also one that delivers all of its warming in the first decade or two before it starts to fade away. So again, emergency brakes will be one of the strategy lenses we use to think about climate solutions. But we also focus on geography and what we call hotspots, kind of the places where climate solutions may have the biggest possible impact. Sometimes in climate action, we spread our resources evenly across a country or an economic sector or supply chain, but that's not strategic. By putting our resources in the most impactful places, we can often get 2x, 5x, 10 times more impact for the same resources. Let me show you some examples in another part of the world, in South Asia. For example, in India, we can identify kind of hot spots of methane emissions in red, of methane emissions from rice across India, but also the opportunity to cut those emissions in that kind of purple color to the right. Similarly, we can look at nitrous oxide emissions from overusing fertilizers in India, showing kind of geographic concentrations in some regions, and also where the solutions could be disproportionately effective. So as we approach the work in Southeast Asia, one of our key jobs was to identify these so-called hotspots. First and foremost, we did this through the lens of deforestation. Deforestation is the single largest source of emissions in Southeast Asia, and it's bigger than all the industry, electricity, and transport sectors combined. And when we look across the world, we can see the emissions of forest by looking at land cover change. Now, today, we can track forest cover change regularly. In fact, Planet Labs can do this every day at 3-meter resolution. We can also look at these kind of data sets from the Global Forest Watch, Matt Hansen's data from the University of Maryland, and so on, and see which regions of the world are experiencing losses of tree cover and forest cover, especially here in Southeast Asia. We can also, by studying the satellite data over time, identify what are the major drivers of forest cover change and forest loss. Whether it's commodity agriculture, for example, palm oil, or is it shifting agriculture, or is it plantations or other things? What is causing the forest loss? But as we zoom into the Southeast Asian region, we can see which areas of forest have been lost over the last decade or so, which is shown here in this kind of map, where the darker colors show the more extensive loss of forest cover. And we can identify so-called hotspots, the regions of disproportionate forest loss, the kind of bullseyes on the map that are here when we look at deforestation over the last decade or so. But then our team looked at where those forests were in terms of the soils they were sitting on. The kind of paler color, if you will, are dominated by mineral soils. This is just regular soils that don't have extremely high levels of carbon. But those darker red, almost maroon colored areas, those are forest on peatlands. So when those forests are cleared and burned, we're not only losing the forest canopy and its biomass, we're also losing tremendous carbon stocks of the soil that have been building up over thousands of years. And so protecting peatlands has the highest per hectare emission savings of anything we do in all these land use solutions. Analyzing this data, we often apply what we call kind of an 80-20 rule. It isn't precisely 80-20, it just represents the notion that maybe something like 80% or so, depending on the situation, of the impact of a climate solution could be realized by focusing on the 20 or a small fraction of the whole domain. In this case, what we look at is all of the forest. We find that about 12% of the forest are being cleared. But by zooming into where the peatland forests are, we find that it's about 1.6% of the forest are both a deforestation hotspot and a disproportionately high carbon target of peatland forest. So this gives us this very powerful focus point of where the disproportionate impact would be in protecting these particular forests. Naturally, we'd like to protect all forest everywhere, but sometimes we have to prioritize our efforts, and this is where the priority should be. We can do the same thing for other major greenhouse gas solutions. For example, rice cultivation. Now here we can look at the methane reduction potential. Now this is just kind of a fancy way of saying how much methane could we avoid by changing the way we grow rice. Most of the rice grown in this region is grown through what's called continuous flooding, where just the field is flooded continuously, standing water all the time. But there are ways to grow rice where you alternate the wetting and drying of rice fields with the same basic yields, but with tremendously lower methane emissions. But it turns out this doesn't work the same everywhere. We found through a huge number of studies by Erie and others around the world that by looking at the regions where rice is grown and on irrigation patterns, we can find where some regions are better at reducing methane emissions than others by changing the flooding regime. So our team analyzed this and found, again, kind of an 80-20 rule, that by changing these irrigation patterns and reducing methane emissions, you could get 64% of the methane benefits on only 20% of the rice fields using this technique. You can see them here highlighted in places mostly in Vietnam. So again, by kind of looking through the lens of these hotspots and geographic 80-20 rules, we can kind of set geographic priorities of these key interventions. Now, this is just looking one solution at a time. When you look at the report, you'll notice that we actually analyzed many different climate solutions in food and agriculture and land use. And of course, we can stack them on top of each other, look at every possible solution we analyzed, and then ask, what solution might have the biggest impact in each region? So here's just a simple map showing for every kind of provincial region, every kind of subnational unit here across Southeast Asia, what was the dominant solution? What was the solution that had the highest potential? And just kind of, what was ranked number one in every geographic region? Whether it was protecting forests with peatlands, changing the way we grow rice, or changing the way we use fertilizers. And of course, it varies quite a lot. But that's kind of almost a binary kind of view, like what number one solution is there, ignoring the other three or four. Maybe we could be more nuanced than that. So we developed some other ways of looking at this that are developing portfolios of climate solutions that have the best kind of overall mix of reducing emissions in every part of the world. And we produced reports for every country across Southeast Asia with very detailed analyses. For example, in Vietnam, these pie charts in every kind of district across the country show what is the opportunity for avoiding emissions in what of these 6 different climate solutions. So whether it's protecting forest, protecting peatlands or mangroves, changing fertilizer use, alternating wetting and drying of rice production, or changing crop residue burning, we see what the opportunity space is in each region. In the north and the south, we might see rice being very, very important, in other regions, forest protection being important, etc. We did this across every country. Here it is in Indonesia. Here we are in the Philippines, showing, again, peatland forests being extremely important here in the Philippines, what's going on in Thailand. And again, the regional heterogeneity, how where you are drives so much of the strategy. And global average, national average numbers would not mean very much. We really need to get down to these spatial details. It's absolutely crucial, whether we're in Thailand, Cambodia, or beyond. So the report really presents not only the potential for climate solutions across the region, but again, for the very first time, kind of anywhere in the world, developing detailed portfolios at the regional to local level across a vast region of the world. So we're very, very excited about this report that you will see, and we hope you'll dive into it. It's presented in several different ways, kind of thematically, geography, and by solution. So depending on how you would like to review the data, you can approach it from multiple different directions. We hope you will enjoy it and look at this report, and we'd love to get your feedback on it. And it was mentioned too, before I wrap up, we also went far beyond the report. All of the data and all the methodology we used in this analysis also became part of a much larger global effort that we just launched a couple of weeks ago called the Drawdown Explorer. And we'd invite you to also look at this. The Drawdown Explorer is a new web platform on our website at drawdown.org, and it is really the world's leading platform for climate solutions. It is doing like what we just did for Southeast Asia, but for the world. And now we're building it across all sectors of greenhouse gas emissions. It uses the latest science and the latest big data. Unlike other approaches like an IPCC report that's out of date by the time it's even written and is only published every 7 years, this is reflecting the latest data from this last year. It's trying to bring it down not to just one number for the world, but down to those regional and local levels where it is so crucial to get it right. This is a big job. It's taking about 24 PhDs working on it pretty much full time. We've spent over 20,000 hours working on this so far, analyzing over 150 solutions with trillions of data points, and also taking a great deal of care in the editing, design, and production of this website. The goal here, though, is to bring climate solutions to the here and now with the latest data. So it's very up to date, will constantly be routinely updated, but also bringing localized intelligence down to the regional and local levels. And it is open, it is free, and it will be free forever. No paywalls, no subscriptions. We're giving it away. Beyond that, one other thing I would like to mention is the work we've done here with APC has truly inspired us to think more deeply about food. Of all the sectors that are driving climate change around the world, this is the one that keeps me up at night the most. It's where we have a lot of confusion. It's also one of the larger sectors that has not made very much progress yet, and yet it's so crucial to get it right while balancing the needs of the environment with the economy and human well-being. So next year, inspired by the work we've done here with APC, we're planning to launch a campaign of sorts called Reimagine Food, thinking about the future of food and climate through the lens of solutions. We'll be focusing on 7 big areas of solutions, whether it's starting with our diets, how we rethink food loss and food waste, how we focus on protecting natural ecosystems like forest and mangroves and others around the world, how we can farm better with lower emissions on our croplands and pastures, how we can reduce the other emissions in the food system like packaging and transport and refrigeration and landfills, etc. And how can we be maybe putting carbon back into these systems by restoring nature that's no longer needed for food production, or put carbon back into our working lands, in our croplands, fields, and soils. This campaign is going to have a layer of science, of course, identifying the problems and the solutions, a layer of strategy, turning those scientific solutions into targeted recommendations with emergency breaks and geographic hotspots, reaching out to key professionals like philanthropists, investors, business leaders, policymakers, and more. And then combining all that, we hope, with a layer of storytelling, showing the human faces behind these solutions to help inspire more collaboration, more investment, more action by making this relatable, enjoyable, and inspiring. So thanks again to the work of APC in making this all possible, because I think only through collaboration can we build a better food system, a food system that can be grounded in science, that has practical strategies for building a better world around us, and unlock a better future where we address the needs of our world, of our future, and of our planet at the same time. So with that, I'd just like to say thank you once again to APC and to everyone here, and also especially to my colleagues at Project Drawdown who did all this tremendous work. And with that, I think we'll stop here for a moment and switch over to questions and conversation. So again, thank you so, so much once again for the opportunity to be here with you tonight. All right.
Sean, thank you so much. That was incredibly rich, and all kudos to yourself and the team at Project Drawdown for being able to actually, spend that much of your time and resources to actually pull all of that data from across the region. This is incredibly rich, and I'll just want to invite everybody to maybe, this is an open floor. Please feel free to ask questions, share your reflections. That will really help us in building the momentum forward.
Wonderful. I might defer some of the questions to my colleagues on the call who really were doing a lot more of the hands-on analysis than so on. So depending on the question, we may bounce them to others here. And I hope, yeah, people will get to meet Daria here, but also Jamie and Emily from the Drawdown team. So those are the folks who really did all the work. I just got to be the face of it tonight. So what do we have? Do we have some questions coming in?
Yeah, we do have a question. Oh, go ahead, Swati. Sorry.
No, no, go ahead, Daria.
Okay, yeah. Well, thank you, John, and thank you to APC for supporting this amazing work. And as John mentioned, Emily and Jamie also for really doing the data analysis and writing of this report. One of the questions, since we're talking about Jamie, is did we engage local NGOs and community leaders for data collection? And if so, or if not, could we share more about our approach for collecting data?
Yeah, Jamie, please.
Sure, I'm happy to address that question. First, though, since I'm getting a chance to talk, I would like to add my voice to the chorus, thanking APC for the support in this, not just financial, but also as John mentioned, the connections and the context. And one particular aspect that I really appreciated was putting us in touch with some really knowledgeable reviewers who helped us review the report when it was time for that. I see some on the call right now, so I'm very pleased about that. So thank you. And now I've completely forgotten the question, which was about data, how we got data, and interacting with local actors to get data. Yes, and so we wanted to get data that was, in the scientific literature when possible, and global would be nice so we can maximize interactions with the Drawdown Explorer. So we did not make detailed data collection a big part of this effort. We were mostly mining existing data sources that were available in the literature. However, there were cases where we were querying local people with on the ground knowledge, like, for example, Debbie of Proxima Designs. We spoke to get some context and insight on some data we were getting about flooding practices in Myanmar in particular. So we did reach out to get locally sourced data where possible, but we tended to use that to inform our interpretation of scientific literature provided data sets.
Yeah, it's so important to, these kind of analyses to, we're a North American-based organization, well, in Europe too, but it's so important to have local context and expertise. And, so Jamie's worked quite hard with local partners that APC helped identify. At the same time, some of the data sets were already in the scientific literature and we were able to find before that as well. And some were global and others as well. So it's kind of both and, as you're saying, right, Jamie?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great.
Thanks, Jamie. This one, I think, is a little bit geared towards Emily, but also an interesting topic to touch on from the report, or maybe why it was less so in the report. But can you say more about alternative protein development as a solution, since animal production is a significant cause of carbon emission, and maybe how we looked at animal production in this report?
Sure. Yeah, I can tackle that one. So we didn't specifically identify alternative protein development, but we did look at the emission reductions from shifting diets towards a diet that's more healthy and sustainable, as defined by Eat Lancet, which is, if you don't know, that's a dietary recommendation that encourages less red meat and more vegetables in general. But what we found when we looked at the dietary trends in Southeast Asia, it's actually a lot of Southeast Asian countries don't eat much ruminant meat. It's typically below Eat Lancet levels. And so the emissions, while there was some emissions reduction potential of making that shift, it wasn't as big as other solutions. So it wasn't a big emphasis of this report. And we included a chart in the report which kind of looked at per capita GDP and consumption as compared to other countries, and Southeast Asia is typically below the trend line of what you would expect. But since APC is a Singapore-based organization, I do know that is a very exciting avenue of research and development is alternative proteins, especially if you're replacing ruminant meat with alternative proteins. So although it's not something that we specifically tackled here, we do tackle that in Drawdown Explorer too, as we're looking at shifting diets away from ruminant meat towards other kinds of protein-rich food, and looking at alternative proteins as a potential solution to keep watching, because it's not yet big enough to qualify as a solution with our methodology for Drawdown Explorer.
One thing that's kind of fascinating to think about is Southeast Asia is kind of leading the world actually in having perhaps as a region the most sustainable diets at different levels of economic development of anywhere in the world. If Southeast Asia ate more like European or North American diets, your emissions would be much higher. So that's actually a place where Southeast Asia is clearly leading the world in terms of at various different income levels too, all very different than the global trend lines of usually as countries are wealthier, they consume far more red meat, but not so much in Southeast Asia, which is really a model for probably the rest of the world to begin to emulate more. And also, as Emily mentioned, Singapore being a leader in the kind of alternative protein production technology and businesses, again, leading the planet. Singapore, more than anywhere else, probably is doing this. So it's really quite admirable.
Thanks, Emily and John. The next question is, how were more qualitative considerations around feasibility of solutions, political sensitivities, et cetera, incorporated into our research?
Who wants to tackle that? Jamie or Emily first, maybe? Or what do you think?
Sure, I will. I will gladly address that. But it may not be quite the answer you are looking for. I think we are aware of the importance of the political context and what's required for implementing. Our view, or my view, is that we are based in the West. We don't have the local expertise necessary to really understand and help advance what will drive something in a sort of complex political system, complex socioeconomic system. So our goal is to make available tools and analysis and prioritization for someone who can come in aware of that and knowing how to push the levers within that system. So we're aware they're there, but they don't factor into our analysis directly.
Yeah, maybe echoing that too. I mean, our work here is really looking at the scientific potential of these solutions and their feasibility from a quantitative point of view. It would be probably wildly beyond our remit, and as a bunch of Americans coming in saying we know what's best is probably not a good idea here at any part of the world. So really, again, like giving tools to say now people on the ground who really know the nuances of social, economic, and political systems across this region can then take this science and then say, aha, here's what is possible really here. But we're really bracketing the problem by looking at the scientific potential, not always the political and social and economic reality of what's possible on the ground. That's a further step, and that's part of the wonderful nature of collaboration. We all others can pick up where we left off and take it to the next level.
Thanks, John, and Jamie. Um, the next question is, sorry, just looking through here. In the map we showed for solutions with greatest potential, protecting forests seemed to be a key solution. Could you share some tangible strategies involved in protecting forests?
Yes, one of the greatest resources for that too, I'd like to point people to. I hope this is a resource that many folks in Southeast Asia will look at. There's an international effort underway called Forest for People and Climate. If you go to forestpeopleclimate.org, you'll find a very, very impressive kind of a set of organizations around the world that are starting to collaborate to bring the best evidence forward possible to what are the techniques that best protect forest around the world. And we've tried many different mechanisms for this. For example, we can build parks and put fences around the forest to kick the people out. While that might have some short-term benefits for the environment and nature, it's not ultimately sustainable because you can't do that at the exclusion of human well-being. Other methods have been using things like, carbon offsets and, RED projects and paying people not to deforest land. That has worked sometimes, but unfortunately, many of those projects have also failed in the long term and haven't really lived up to their full promise. So again, a market-based mechanism, a full protection-based mechanism, these are all, mechanisms that have been tried, but not universally successful. In many parts of the world, what is found is that community-based, especially led by indigenous and local communities that are long-term residents of many of these regions, having a different economic model that helps them live with forest and still thrive, working with the local communities, working with indigenous communities, helping them secure land tenure, long-term land stewardship, and economic opportunities in the communities in which they live. That is proven again and again to be the most kind of straightforward, but also ultimately most effective way of protecting these forests where people and nature thrive together. Again, the nuances that do depend a lot on the country and the cultural context, and it varies a lot from place to place. But overall, that is found to be kind of the most important way to protect forest. So if you go to forestpeopleclimate.org, which was an international collaboration of scientists, nonprofits, and many large philanthropies around the world, and it's been hosted by CLUA, the Climate and Land Use Alliance, which was founded by groups like the Packard Foundation and the Moore Foundation, MacArthur, and many others. I think you'll find some wonderful efforts there, including connections to local on-the-ground nonprofits and community organizations that are really working to protect forest. And they are actually seeking funding for opportunities to do that. I believe they're aiming to raise the first $2 billion right now to protect forest in Southeast Asia, but also across the Congo Basin of Africa and the Amazon Basin, the three kind of most crucial kind of forest systems on the planet today. So that's probably the best place I can point people to, the latest and best kind of practice and evidence for forest protection. This is such a critical issue, again, not just for climate, but also for nature, for biodiversity, and for human well-being, and for communities around the world. There's probably nothing really more important. A lot of people ask me, ask my colleagues, what's the most important climate solution? And I usually arrive at protecting forest. And I don't just say that when I'm talking to people from Southeast Asia. I say it everywhere because it's one of the fastest, cheapest, and best climate solutions, but it's also the best solution to protecting the world's biological diversity. And it's one of the best things we can do for human well-being in many parts of the world as well. This seems like something the world should muster the resources and kind of the gumption to do, is to really save these critical, incredible forests across the tropical belt of our planet, especially, as well as other regions.
Thanks, John, and thanks for pointing out that great resource in Forest People Climate. To kind of build off of this question, can you elaborate more on how we approach analyzing additional benefits in this report and kind of more generally as an organization?
Yeah, in every climate solution, and Jamie and Emily can add to this as well too, and Daria, you can as well. We all work on this. But one of the things we really want to stress is that climate solutions often have many benefits to the world, not just preventing carbon from going into the atmosphere. When you protect a forest, you protect biodiversity, you protect a watershed, you protect somebody's home. When you protect a forest, you also clean the air from forest fires and smoke that cause tremendous health impacts around the world. You protect the world's future as well. There's so many additional benefits from what's called a climate solution. It's more than a climate solution, it's just a solution to a better future. So we find this is true for almost all of these climate solutions. Reducing the excessive use of fertilizers, for example, not only helps prevent nitrous oxide from going in the air, it prevents nitrate from going in the water, which is one of the principal forms of water pollution in many parts of the world, locally in our drinking water, but also in our watersheds and even our coastal oceans, causing hypoxic dead zones, declining fisheries around the world. There are about 18 major dead zones in the ocean, largely across the world, in every continent, largely downstream of places that use excessive levels of fertilizer in their crop production. So across the world, we need to kind of rethink fertilizers, not just from a climate point of view, but from an economic point of view, a human health point of view, an ecological point of view, et cetera. So all these so-called climate solutions, I can show you for every single one of these, there's some other tremendous benefits. In the past, we would call these the co-benefits, and I think we got to stop calling them that. It kind of, when we say a co-benefit, it seems like we're putting that in second place. That, helping people clean their drinking water is somehow a secondary benefit to stopping carbon from going in the atmosphere, or, saving biological diversity is a co-benefit of climate action. No, these are sometimes the leading benefits of so-called climate action. So I hope we can begin to have a more nuanced conversation about these kind of things that we should do, not only for climate, but for nature and for ourselves. And that's why these so-called additional benefits are absolutely crucial. And in the Drawdown Explorer, we track 18 of them for every climate solution, 6 for climate adaptation, 6 for nature, and 6 for direct impact on human well-being. That's just a start. There's so much more that these so-called climate solutions can do for the world. And think about the additional support that I can garner, the additional resources that I could bring to the table when we kind of offer a bigger perspective than just climate change. And also think about the friction that goes away when we point out these so-called climate solutions benefit everybody, whether they care about climate change or not. So that's a perspective, especially in light of Bill Gates' recent memo saying that somehow we should focus on health, not climate change. He missed the point. They're so interconnected. They're the same thing. We should just be thinking of solutions to climate, to economic development, and to human well-being as one solution, not a false choice. They are the same thing if we do it the right way. And I think this report is one starting point in that, and I hope the Drawdown Explorer work also emphasizes these tremendous synergies that are possible.
Thanks, John. Emily or Jamie, do you have anything to add before we pass it back to APC? No?
I guess
Okay.
I'd like to just point out that one way that we took benefits, we made it central, I think, in some ways to our analysis, in addition to noting them, how important they are. The analysis, one constraint in the analysis was never allowing yields to decrease or lead or promote actions that would be disadvantageous for farmer livelihoods, right? For the fertilizer management solution, yields had to increase or stay the same, and the same for rice management, for example. So it was the benefits to people of these actions was really central to how we went about the science.
Thank you. Well, we also got a lot of questions about how this report is planned to be shared in the region. So I want to hand that back to the experts at APC to share a little bit more about their plan. But thank you so much, everyone, for these great questions. And we look forward to everyone reading the report.
Thank you all so much.
Great. Thank you, Daria, for facilitating that part. I think there are some very incredible questions out there, and there are some that we haven't been able to address at this forum today, but please feel free to write back to us, or we can respond back to you and write back to you over email with our responses. I think I would like to address maybe one of the questions, which is, it's an interesting one to see what's next. So perhaps beyond this call, what is the plan to get this into the hands and agendas of many, many more philanthropists to start funding some of these areas? And I think it's a very prudent question. It's not a process that we were waiting for until we had a formal launch of this. I think as the report was being created and was being refined and whatnot, we were engaging with the broader philanthropic network even at that time. Just a few weeks ago, there was a large philanthropic gathering that happened in Singapore, and we made sure that the findings of the report were reaching the hands of as many philanthropists, both the regional philanthropists as well as the global funders who were coming down to Singapore to be able to sort of get a look at what the regional landscape has to tell us, and how do we prioritize and create momentum on some of those actions. We are already seeing some philanthropic communities coming together to start creating the next steps in terms of learning circles, and starting to shape some of the collaborative actions around this space. Not FALU as a large, because again, as we unpack FALU, each one of those areas in itself is a massive ecosystem. Yes, so I think the intent is, how do we take it forward from here? And if given APC is really anchored in collaboration, and we really want to join forces with as many of the partners as we can. So please feel free to write back to us if you're interested to explore more about this space, and we'd be happy to take that forward, not just within the philanthropic community, but the larger partner network that we have within Southeast Asia. But even if you're interested in the work in Southeast Asia, yes, it's an open invitation to all. And with that, my deepest thanks to Project Drawdown team, and I will pass it back to I'll pass it to Anastasia, who is an incredible part of the APC team, to get us through the closing.
Okay, let me just quickly share the screen again. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for spending the time with us today. And thank you so much, John, for the eye-opening sharing and consolidating the insights in such a clear manner. I saw one of the comments, and it's like, wow, this clear communications. And I think that's what we need as well, to kind of unpack and learn more about what we can do moving forward. And I would also like to take this chance to thank the Project Drawdown team, Daria, Jamie, Emily, for the wonderful partners, as being wonderful partners with us through this journey. And a big thank you to the funders and partners and the reviewers who made this work possible, and also all of you for being here today and engaging in this conversation with us today. We've heard many rich insights, and one thing we are hearing loud and clear is that while our region, Southeast Asia, is facing significant climate challenges, it's also a region with extraordinary potential for climate action in this sector. So as we hear today, the science-based roadmap is just the beginning, and hopefully it will drive further conversations and collaborative action. Feel free to scan this QR code to export the report, or don't worry if you miss it, you can access it at Project Drawdown's website, or as well as Asia Philanthropy Circle's website. And hope that this can be a tool for our work and decision-making processes. And as we close, let me take this moment also to invite us all for a reflection. We have heard so many insights and many levers to action. I guess one thing I hope that you can take away from this sharing is that, what is one area that resonated most with you, and where do you have the means or influence to help move action forward? And this can be an internal reflection, or if you'd like to share this thought with us, I would love to continue the conversation. So please don't hesitate to reach out. You can find our emails on the screen, or any kind of questions that you have. So thank you again for joining us today and for being part of this collective effort, and hope to see you again in future conversations.